Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Nerve Guys podcast, where we discuss movement through the lens of the brain. My name's James. I'm going to be your host as always. And as always, I would really love it if you would check out the NeuroBand. That's my vision and balance training tool to help improve posture, coordination, and focus. That was embarrassing. Do this every week and I always forget what to say. I'll talk about that more at the end of the video. This week we're getting on with a couple of more life stories. Usually I'm answering questions. I decided to take a brief pause from that just to see what people think of this format. Last week was kind of depressing, so I don't know if it came across like that, but yeah, it was a lot of details about surgery. This week we're going to go a little bit more fun. If you know me personally, you know that I get into a lot of really dumb situations in my life. I like undertaking yearly projects, so rather than like a New Year's resolution, I'll always get into like from January to December, I want to undertake a project that, you know, could be anything from I want to try and break a world record to I want to just focus on my sleep and make my sleep better. I guess that's the same as a what am I talking about? I guess it's the same as a New Year's resolution. And I usually do a similar thing from about June onwards as well. So like my birthday, end of June, I always like to have like a second yearly challenge. That way, if the one I start in January turns out to be really hard and I can't see it through, then I've got a second wind. And if I can keep both of them up, it's even better. Today we're going to be talking about one of those, and it's probably the dumbest one that I've done. It's the stupidest idea I've had to take through a year, and to explain why, I guess we should talk very briefly about pathological demand avoidance. So I am the kind of person that if somebody tells me something can't be done, I immediately need to do that thing. I need to show the person that they were wrong, and especially if they do it in a dismissive kind of way. If you say, it is not possible to hold your breath for 30 minutes, the first thing I will do in the morning is start training breath holds and look up all the science on breathing to try and see if I can beat the current world record in holding your breath. We'll maybe get into the psychology of why I'm like that in another video. Don't worry, I've been working on it, but it's there. And that's basically what led to a challenge I undertook where I tried to complete 2,048 pull-ups in one day. Basically, I had a job. I was working with a strength and conditioning coach, quite a well-renowned coach with a pretty impressive client base, let's say. And I was kind of just brainstorming ideas of, you know, things that would echo close to the Atomic Habits style of, you know, improve everything by 1% and suddenly you see things grow exponentially. And I kind of liked that idea, and I wanted to run through a bunch of scenarios to see, like, what would this actually look like if I was learning how to handstand and I got 1% better, how long could I handstand for by the end of the year? That one was kind of interesting. If you just run 1%, if you start with a 1 second handstand, you get to almost half a year and you're still going to be on a 1 second handstand. By the end of the year, you've completed your handstand for 37 seconds. And it's one of the interesting things where I actually think that exponential approach to training is a little bit flawed, just because when you see those exponential gains, it doesn't always mean they're going to be as easy to achieve. And a lot of the time you end up getting into like the realm of unreachable pretty quickly. This idea was even more unreachable than that one. This was just to see what if you just doubled the number of pull-ups you did every month for a year? Came from the idea of, that old tale of the guy who asked for the grain of rice on a chessboard, but every square you're going to have double what was on the last square. So you start with 1 grain of rice, then you have 2, then 4, then 8, then 16, and it sounds like it's going to be really simple, but by the time you get to covering an entire chessboard, you've got more rice than is available in the entirety of the world. So my theory was, well, what would you do if you did 1 pull-up every day for January, or in my case, July, and then 2 for the next month, every day, 2 pull-ups, then 4, then 8, then 16. By the end of the year, you're going to be reaching 2,048. And me, because I like to brainstorm ridiculous things, I said that out loud. And that was my mistake, I guess, because immediately this strength and conditioning coach turns around and says, yeah, it's too much. Like, there's no way you're going to be able to maintain that. And because this was around the time of my birthday, I just set it up and said, okay, cool, I'm doing it. I'm going to try and prove this wrong, that it is possible for somebody who doesn't do a whole lot of pull-ups to teach themselves to do 2,048 pull-ups by the end of the year. Now, to clarify this, I already knew this was a ridiculous statement, and I already have a history of trying ridiculous things. I do challenges all the time that don't necessarily go very well for me, just because I like to think of impossible things and then try and figure out where my limits are without limiting myself to like what other people think is reasonable. Sometimes I've pleasantly surprised myself, and the majority of times I've got the result that was expected, but I kind of feel that it's still worth doing because I still learn something by the end of it. So yeah, let's chat about how it went. Month number 1, 1 pull-up every day. Pretty fine. Month number 2, 2 pull-ups every day. I would say, for me, the maximum number of like strict pull-ups that I've ever done in a row has been probably about 8 or 10. I have kind of slightly uneven shoulders that don't know exactly where that's come from, but because I was never super interested in being able to do high numbers of pull-ups, not something that I decided to work on for myself. So I reckon about 8 in a row was where my limit was going to be. So obviously the first couple of months, especially up to about 4, the recovery time for me for 4 pull-ups was easy enough. So nothing very interesting went on there. The next month, when it got to 8, that's when I had to start playing with the rules a little bit. So up until that point, I'd been doing everything in a row. From 8 pull-ups was like, okay, cool, don't have to do them in a row. As long as you do that number of pull-ups, and as long as they're straight pull-ups, it counts. And that kind of was how things went for 8, 16. Then I think I had another hurdle at about 32 pull-ups. I probably could have kept going the way that I was going, but I decided to save time. I was going to change the rules one more time, and now CrossFit style kipping pull-ups were allowed. So that's where you don't actually pull up all of your weight. You start to swing your legs, and you kind of have this like little circular motion that sort of helps you get into the pull-up. I think I got to a point where I could do about 20 of those in a row. So much easier than doing 8 strict pull-ups. If I really want to, I probably could have pushed it a little bit harder. And that was month, whatever, for 32. Next month is when the problems started to kick in. So I kind of got lucky with 32 because I had made the rules a bit easier. It still felt like I could recover a little bit from doing the 32 each day. When I hit 64 pull-ups in a day, my body very much started to feel the effects, started to crumble under the pressure, and I started to notice, like I said, I haven't worked on my shoulder posture specifically for stuff like pull-ups really ever. I've also, if you heard last week's episode, I've had major surgery on the left side of my face that actually causes lots of rotational issues in my torso when I'm not working on them. That gets amplified when I'm stressed. So as I'm trying to do all these huge amounts of pull-ups in a day, all of these issues are starting to creep in really, really quickly, and I ended up getting a ton of issues in my right shoulder, and then weirdly started getting some injuries in my left hip, which, you know, you think isn't going to bother you, but every time when I'm landing and stuff and walking around, just seem to be adding to the stress overall. So I kind of motored through that, but by the end of this month, I think this is half the year. Let me work this out. 1, 2, 4, 16, 32. Yeah, so 64 was half the year. I realized that if I was going to keep going any further, there's no way I can make this be every day. So the next kind of compromise I was going to make was I was going to drop at least one day of training from the following months. So like for 128, I would do only 6 days in the week, then 4, 6, 2, 5, 6. Then I drop out 2 days, and so on and so on. And I think when I worked it out, if you drop one each month, then you're going to end up by the last time, you only have to do 1 day of the 2000. So that felt like, okay, cool, maybe that can work. The other thing that I started to notice was around about 64, my motivation started to really dip. So coming along with all the pain and the injuries and stuff like that, I just started to really hate doing any of my kind of pull-up work. I started having like just monster sessions where I'd put on, I think the Andrew Huberman podcast had just come out, and it was like 3 hours long. So I would stick 1 or 2 of those on and just sit in the living room and go, and just anytime I felt able, I would go and do either the kipping pull-ups or just like single pull-ups when I felt like the mood took me. And then we moved into the period of like the 128, 256, 512, pretty much all of that time basically like that. I was getting more and more injured. I was starting to see my mood tank like just daily. I didn't feel good all the time. I would say that just like my resting kind of happiness levels were for sure in the negative, not majorly, like I wasn't super depressed or anything, but pretty much the first thing that I thought when I woke up was like, you got to do these pull-ups today. This sucks. And every day that I had a day off just felt amazing. Like that was my favorite thing, was just having the day off, looking forward to it. This is one of the big things that I tell to people, you know, especially if you've seen my podcast about how much pain we need. You probably go like, what are you doing? You keep telling people that you shouldn't be pushing yourself through this kind of stuff. I tell people that they shouldn't have to. If you're an adult, do what you want to do. You just need to know what the actual rules are versus what people tell you are the rules. So pain is not something you should need to be dealing with all the time. But if you decide to be really stupid and embark on a quest where you're going to deal with it daily, then, you know, that's on you. That's your choice. And my goal was to find out what would happen if I tried to get myself to 2,000 pull-ups by doubling the reps each month. So yeah, I think the next 3 months all I can say about that was really depressing time. I was having to play around with like weird postures. I noticed that if I did my head to the right, it made it a lot easier to do the pull-ups. Then I was starting to notice like different hip positions and stuff would cause like less impingements and stuff like that. So every pull-up became a little bit less uniform. And somewhere within that, I can't remember which month it was, but I eventually came to the conclusion that if I was going to make it to the end of this challenge, the next rule I was going to have to break was I could go up, but I wasn't going to be able to go down. That was just too much effort that I wasn't really recovering. Like even when I had 3 days off, I was still just in pain. My hands were also just horrifically like blistered and sore constantly all the time. At some point I bought gloves as well, and that just didn't really help. It still felt horrible and awful. And yeah, nothing positive to say about that all the way through to 512, which I was doing like 3 times, I guess. I feel like maybe I might have been a little bit lenient with myself when it came to that as well. I probably didn't do it 3 times for 4 weeks. I probably did it once or maybe twice, but the 512 I definitely got done. The penultimate month was then 1,024 pull-ups, and supposed to do it twice a week. By the time I got to that month, I kind of had it in my mind, like, this isn't going to work. I'm going to fail this. And I resigned myself to, there's no chance that I'm going to do this. If I do the full 1,000, there's no way that I'm going to be able to do it twice a week. I don't even think I'm going to be able to do it once a week. I basically took most of the day and spent most of the day just anytime I had the opportunity, did a pull-up, got to the end of it once, and then took the rest of the month off. By that point, my mood had tanked to the point that the rest of that month, I still felt completely miserable. The other thing that I forgot to mention that I was doing at some point through that was my brain just went straight into just soothe me. I was eating all kinds of crap, junk food. I was I was absolutely, despite doing all of this physical stuff, I was putting on weight pretty quickly, and it was basically just my mood was so bad, so horrible. The sensible thing to do would have been to stop, but I decided, right, I've got this far. I want to get to this 2,000 mark, or 2,048. The day before I was going to try it, mentioned it to another colleague I was working with, and he just kind of said, like, have you even like thought about how fast you need to do these? Like the 1,000, it took me the whole day, and I didn't count how much time was in between, but like it sucked the whole time, and I definitely didn't feel like I could up the ante and like do the pull-ups faster. Like even though I'm only doing singles now, I'm going all the way up and then dropping down, hopefully not cheating. Like the pull-up bar I had was just one of the ones on the door frame, so I'm pretty sure I was strict about like starting at the bottom, but I'm sure I probably knocked a few not quite genuine ones in there. But we worked out that you had to do 7 pull-ups a minute for basically all of the day that I would be awake. I can't remember if that was for a whole 24 hours or whether we actually said, okay, make it 16 hours. But it was about 7 pull-ups a minute at a consistent rate the whole way through the day. And I kind of took that information and was like, all right, cool, okay, didn't think about that. Every minute of the day I need to make sure I've done at least 7. Morning came, woke up, felt horrible, did not want to go through with it. However, I got started. Things did not feel good immediately. As I got around about the 100 mark, I started to notice that my left arm was now just starting to feel weak. I was getting all sorts of weird sensations through the forearm, and my hands from like being just all torn up and blistered and all that. The pain just felt like every time I touched the bar, I just got this sense of sadness. And then I did the pull-up. The pull-up was usually fine, but then I had this overwhelming sense of like pain and discomfort through my left forearm. Kind of kept pushing through that, and then roughly about, I'm trying to remember the total number I ended up doing in that day. I think I did 700 and something. Got to that point around about lunchtime. I had already kind of calculated that I was sort of slipping on my rate, so I wasn't keeping to the 7 a minute. So it was very unlikely that I was going to finish. And just one pull-up I remember doing that my brain just said, nope. And I just kind of did it, came down, walked away, sat down, and literally just stared at the wall for about an hour. I remember because I think the Euros football was playing Scotland v somebody, and yeah, I just kind of sat through most of that match, being aware that it was on, but just like not taking in anything. And pretty much then I decided to hit the nail on the head. So yeah, didn't complete the challenge. And I actually don't know, like when I say like, are you impressed with how far you came, or like, I don't really know. I think actually the long-term effect on my health was so bad. I kind of predicted, bad things would happen, but usually when I do something kind of stupid, it always works out a little bit in the end. Like, something bad happens, you rest and recover. I think this challenge was one that I'm not sure I have still recovered my way out of. I think it was almost entirely responsible for like different hormone changes, pain issues, grip issues, and certain problems with like sleep and stuff that I went through. And this was only a couple of years ago, so like there's still time to keep resting and recovering through it. But yeah, wasn't a good idea. I'm happy that I get to tell you about it now. I'm kind of interested. I'm a bit of a nerd of like playing around with my own body and like experimenting with different things, and it has left me with a lot of things to experiment on because there's a lot around, like I said, like hormones, thyroid, sleep. Those ones, actually, I've spent a long time recently trying to improve and get better. All of the physical stuff seems to have resolved itself pretty well by now. But yeah, probably definitely won't do that again. I don't know what the point in sharing the story is. I don't think there's a great moral to it, but thought people might find it interesting. So there you go. Let me know what you thought. Have you ever been this stupid when it comes to weird fitness challenges or just life challenges? Let me know. If you found it interesting and you'd like to support the efforts of a total idiot, please check out the Neuroband. It's a vision and balance training tool. I promise I'm not this irresponsible with my clients or people I work with. It's only my own experiments that I do these kind of dumb stuff. Check out the Neuroband. Thank you for watching. I will see you next week.